mean, when you have a United States representative, for crying out loud, appearing in an event sponsored by a designated terrorist group, you really have much bigger problems than what goes on college campuses. But the important thing to understand is that it's all of the same ilk. These are all parts of a concentrated effort to undermine American institutions and turn them into machinery that undermines the national security of this country.
Y'all, welcome. Welcome to the most beautiful, blackest city in the country, the city of Detroit. I don't know if I need to remind you all, but Detroit, we birth movements, not just labor movements. We birth movements on environmental justice, on women's rights, and so much more. So welcome, gain strength from this amazing, beautiful black city that raised me. I don't need to tell you that you're on the right side. I don't need to. But I'll be damned if I wait 10 years before they apologize to all of you for doing what was right at this moment. Each year, our country, and I say our country because it is our country, sends billions of dollars to maintain an apartheid government and support the ongoing ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. It is disgraceful that the Biden administration and my colleagues in Congress continue to smear them for protesting to save lives, no matter faith or ethnicity. It is cowardly. But we're not going to forget in November, are we? The International Court of Justice just ruled that the Israeli government must stop its invasion of Rafah. But President Biden says what's happening in Gaza is not a genocide. Where's your red line, President Biden? You all, every single bullet, every single gun, every single weapon, bombs that we send is a sacrifice of our own schools here at home. Many of which, when I go into the schools, have garbage bags over their drinking fountains because they don't have clean water. President Biden, I hope you hear us loud and clear. Attacking the authority of the International Criminal Court and interfering in the legal process is nothing more than an attempt to prevent the genocidal maniac Netanyahu and his senior Israeli officials from being held accountable for those crimes against humanity. You are an enabler, President Biden. But wait, you know when my colleagues are outraged? They're outraged over the protest on college campuses in our country. They're more outraged than that, than the atrocities happening right now on the ground in Palestine, the war crimes. Y'all, there's no universities in Gaza. We all know this. We say it over and over again. And now, if they get their way, they're going to silence the universities here at home.
Welcome to another episode of Counterculture, the show that stands at the intersection of reason and faith in the battle against sentimentality. That video was MF or Spice, otherwise known as Representative Rashida Tlaib of the Socialist Spice Girls, with her customary anti-Semitic rhetoric speaking at an event in Detroit hosted by the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, which is a designated terrorist organization according to the U.S. State Department, and that includes the State Department under this president, President Biden. I continue to be struck by how little the West has learned from what I guess they would call the now concluded post-9/11 era. It turns out state sponsors of terror like Iran and Islamo-fascist terrorist groups like Hamas and Hezbollah get a say on that matter too. And what they're saying is that killing Jews and Americans is something in which they maintain a high level of interest. This is why the pathetic conduct of America's future and today's putative leaders on campuses is rivaled only by the Biden administration's disgraceful prioritization of domestic politics over the future of our chief ally in the Middle East. For perspective on this moment in what has been a special relationship between Israel and the United States and the future of that relationship, we're pleased to be joined by Liel Liebovitz. Liebovitz is an academic, a journalist, and the editor-at-large of Tablet Magazine. That's tabletmag.com. Liel, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Even if you called me an academic, I'll forgive it.
Yeah. Recovering academic, is that a better characterization?
A refugee from the hellscape that is American academia. Yes, sir.
Well, yeah, I mean, we've talked about it before, but I mean, we need to update your perspective. Not that the conduct has changed much. So I don't know how much the perspective will change, but I read that the encampments are back at Columbia. You just can't keep these model Hamas protesters at bay, I suppose, when there's not much desire to. And the performance of yet another quote unquote elite university president, Michael Schill, before the House committee recently. I wanted to get your perspective on where you think things are with college campuses and whether or not these elite universities have been chastened at all by some of the blowback they've received.
Sadly, I think the answer is of course not, and I think the opening video that you showed goes a long way towards explaining why. I mean, when you have a United States representative, for crying out loud, appearing in an event sponsored by a designated terrorist group, you really have much bigger problems than what goes on college campuses. But the important thing to understand is that it's all of the same ilk. These are all parts of a concentrated effort to undermine American institutions and turn them into machinery that undermines the national security of this country. This is not by choice. I mean, if you think about this is not by happenstance, rather. If you think about the acceptance rate at a college like Columbia, you're looking at something like 1.5 or 2.5%. This tells you that the Tentifada barbarians currently shouting for the execution of hostages and the destruction of the world's only Jewish state, they're not there by mistake. These kids were chosen and trained, not because they were the smartest ones, not because they're the most capable ones, because they're the ones most likely to adhere to this crazed ideology. Their professors were chosen and trained accordingly. The representatives were chosen and trained accordingly. It's all part of the same mechanism.
Yeah, Tentifada. I like that, by the way. It's important, the point you made about undermining American institutions. This is the point that Carol Markowitz made from the New York Post over Memorial Day weekend, when you saw Princeton hunger strikers, part of the Tentifada there in New Jersey, trying to stop a Memorial Day parade because they didn't want people waving American flags to advance. So, and the point that she made is, this is about American flags. So Israel, yes, but it's also about America. Understand that the two are inextricably linked.
100%. Look, I wish I could say that this was just an event or an instance of anti-Israel sentiments. That would have been a relatively small problem. Or even that this is about anti-Semitism, at which point we say, okay, look, there's a relatively small minority of people in this country, less than 2% of the population, Jews. Some people don't like them. That's very regrettable, but that's a problem we could handle. That's not the case. The case is that these people, and this may sound like the worst of kind of heated rhetoric, but I think it is bearing itself as more and more true by the day. These people hate America. They don't like anything we stand for. They don't like our policies or ideas, and so they figured out what is the best way to take this great and powerful country and bring it to its knees. And the answer, it doesn't take a historian or kind of a political strategist to understand, is you can, simply by infiltrating a small number of American institutions and using them ninjutsu style to re-educate the young and recalibrate the terms of our national conversation, you can absolutely make it so that black becomes white, right becomes wrong, and all of a sudden you live in this Orwellian reality in which an American flag is seen as a source of shame and discomfort, and the flag of a terrorist organization that has beheaded children and raped women is something that represents your pride and your affiliation with the wretched of the earth. It's ludicrous, except for we've now had about 40 or 50 years of very distinct work done in this direction, work, not coincidentally, paid for by nations like Qatar and China that have every vested interest in making sure that we grow weaker and stupider by the day.
In the politics of this, I mean, a lot has been made of Biden trying to middle the issue, take all sides, because he's playing to an audience in Dearborn, Michigan, mainly for the state of Michigan and the electoral map. But there are a lot of Jewish legislators, particularly Jewish Democrats, not so much the handful of Jewish Republicans, Jewish Democrats that have been very silent, that are trying to avoid having to take any particular position other than very quietly voting for military aid to Israel. And I wonder, what you say about those individuals.
Well, I think those individuals are trapped in the worst episode ever of The Twilight Zone. I think, some of them may be kind of, politically Machiavellian, others may just be naive. But the fact that they all must reckon with is, one, it's simple, and it's, I think, very, very dire but crucial to understand. And that is that the Democrat Party, which for many, many years has been the sort of natural political home of most American Jews, most of whom, at least secular Jews or non-Orthodox Jews, would consider themselves liberal, that Democrat Party has undergone a significant sea change in its essence and values since the election of Barack Obama. Barack Obama came into power, and I would say with... at this point, it's not much of a controversial opinion. Unlike every president before him of both parties, took real issue with something that was previously considered a core essence of American, of the American ethos, which is the notion of American exceptionalism, the notion that this country is somehow different, that it was chosen by God to play a really crucial and sort of unreproducible role in the course of human events. Barack Obama came into power and famously said, including in his speech in the university in Cairo, look, man, we're just another country. And, the Egyptians they also think they're special, and the Iranians think they're special. We can't go around the world pretending like we are, more than. And then he dreamt up a disastrous, and I would say monstrous policy called the regional realignment, in which he said, here's how we get ourselves out of trouble in the Middle East. We empower the Iranians. We give them power. We give them, we bring them in from the cold. We let them negotiate with us. We make them, a respectable nation again. And then the Iranians will somehow balance out the Saudis and the Israelis, and we would have a Middle East that is somehow completely cohesive because these two powers kind of keep each other at bay. It's a theory so freaking stupid that only a university professor could have ever dreamt it up. What they ended up doing, and this came much, much too late to the minds of some Jewish and even non-Jewish, Democrat lawmakers who were caught, I think, unaware by the kind of impact of all this, is take the world's greatest sponsor of anti-American, anti-Israeli, anti-Western terror and violence, arm it with hundreds of millions of dollars, give it all the support and international clout that it needs to continue and murder us. This is what you're seeing every day with the Biden administration today, which continues to support Hamas for some reason, even though there are still 5 American citizens held captive by this monstrous terror organization, continues to insist that Israel not meet its goal of destroying this evil organization, and continues to do so in the service of this, madcap ideology that is still the greatest and most sinister legacy of Barack Obama.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember Barack Obama being introduced at the Council for Global Affairs in Chicago by none other than Lester Crown, right? This great Jewish family billionaire, and so on and so forth. And I just shook my head. The Jewish influencers and financiers like Lester Crown. I mean, I still struggle to understand what they don't understand about the modern iteration of the Democrat Socialist Party for at least the last 15 years. What is unclear?
Well, that is such an amazing question, and if you had 6 hours and 3 bottles of gin, I could answer it with great gusto. But here's the short version. The short version, I think, has to do with who is it that you are and what is it that you actually believe. For some of us, bearded folk, whose belief in Judaism is paramount and based on practice and study of text, I think we are a little bit more worried because we have our own set of moral, emotional, and religious edicts that we follow very, very clearly, very carefully. It leads us to be more circumspect. However, I think, and this is a loosely guarded secret, most American Jews are what you would call secular. These are not necessarily people who feel very attached to observance or very attached to text or sources. Therefore, they have come to accept a version of Judaism, quote unquote, that is all based on, and this is a great and oft misused phrase, tikkun olam, this notion of Judaism is about repairing the world. Now, that is absolutely true. However, it is true in the context of a very complicated religious tradition. If you just take this phrase, repair the world, and then wed it, as I think, again, Barack Obama and other Democrat leaders have been very good at doing, be like, well, guys, if you truly believe in tikkun olam and repairing the world, this means that being a good Jew means doing whatever the Democrat Party tells you to do and being part of all the progressive sort of rainbow coalition and being a good ally and supporting LGBTQ plus and transgendered and, all the Black Lives Matter, all these movements. And the sort of nefarious movement to basically bring American Judaism or too many American Jews into the fold and have them understand their essence, their belief, their identity as exclusively the property of the American progressive left. That is, again, not a coincidence. It was a very carefully construed project. And it led to the fact that right now, even as, all these insane things are happening, like university campuses flying Hamas flags, Jews getting beaten up in the street, you would hear a lot of American Jews saying, yeah, that troubles me, but oh my God, Donald Trump equals fascism, and I must be a good ally and support the notion that there are 59 genders, even though it's clearly something that the Torah, negates, strongly and clearly. That is where we are right now. Sadly, I think a lot of American Jews are already having to make very difficult choices. Some of them are. I think October 7th was a major wake-up call for a lot of Jewish people in this country. And some of them, sadly, are not.
And do you think the examples that are being provided by, say Bill Ackman, you're looking for profile, Bill Ackman saying, no more donations to Harvard several months back when Claudine Gay embarrassed herself before that House committee. Do those matter? Ken Griffin's not Jewish, but Ken Griffin's saying for the same reason, I'm not giving to Harvard anymore. Does that matter? Does that send a signal to the donor community? Does that send a signal to, the wider left or center left that says, you cannot like Donald Trump, but you can't suborn this?
I think it matters a lot with an asterisk. I think it matters a lot because finally, we're finally getting these people to understand what a sort of muddy water of mutually accrediting mediocrities, these feverish swamps of just America hatred the universities have become, and it is an objectively good thing for anyone, but especially people in positions of power like Griffith and like Bill Ackman, God bless their souls, to come out and say no mas. But the problem goes deeper and further. Look, I like to say that I think American Jews and a lot of Americans in general suffer from a very acute public health crisis, and that is prestige addiction. The notion that we're not good or worthy unless our kid goes to Princeton or Harvard or we have a seat on the board of this, that, and the other. I think getting out, divesting from these universities is a very important first step. A much more important next step would be to say, you know what? It's not the fancy degree that we need. It's the education. Now we're going to take those $20 million and we're going to build new institutions, American institutions. And they may not look at all like Harvard or Princeton or Yale, but they'll be committed to education, to pursuit of knowledge, to the free and unfettered exchange of ideas. And I think very importantly, also to American values. Once we start doing that, rather than just holding out some hope that if we only invested enough money or got enough board members in the right position, we could save Harvard. It's time to say Harvard is gone. It is no more. American colleges are gone. They're no more. Let's not send our kids there. I have a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old. I tell them 3 times a week, you are never going to college because I'm not wasting 4 years of your life and $250,000 of my money for someone to turn you into a little Nazi. It's time for all that money and all that creativity to do what America does best and reinvent something great.
And I mean, not to impugn your character, but you're somebody who got a PhD at Columbia and
Uh-huh.
taught at NYU, right?
Hmm. In the before time.
And what was that the before time? About being 10 years ago?
Meaning about 15 years ago, yeah.
Yeah. So what was it like then?
It was, this is such a tragic story. I'm an immigrant to this country. I came here from Israel, landed on a Thursday night. Friday morning, the literal first thing I did is I took the subway up to 116th and Broadway, and I stood outside, the sort of ivy-covered walls of Columbia, and thought to myself, one day I'll work really hard, and I'll get in, and I'll get a degree, and then I'll be a professor here, and I'll write books, and I'll be invited to all the best parties, all the smartest people, and write for publications like the New York Times. And then something horrible happened. It all came true. I got in, I got the degree, I taught there, I started writing for these publications and meeting these people. And I realized that what I had gotten was a seat, a front row seat at that, to the decline of something profoundly great that defines so much of American intellectual and cultural life for half a century. I realized that the universities were now completely, rife with people who did not want to have actual discussions about ideas. They wanted to use power in order to indoctrinate students and win small political battles and make America weaker and change it into part of this global order fantasy that they imagined, existed somewhere in the world. I saw a lot of animosity. I saw a lot of groupthink. It took me a very long time because I really believed in it and I really wanted to make my life there. And I taught at NYU for almost 10 years and at Columbia for some years too, until I realized that this was a hopeless place. And I left and sort of started preaching the gospel of, hey guys, it's over with colleges. And for many years, almost a decade, people looked at me and said, you're insane. Maybe it's a problem with some leftists on some campuses, but surely it's not endemic, sir. Then, hate to say it, but one day you look around and there are freaking tents and Hamas and Hezbollah flags in literally almost every college campus in this country. At which point you say, time to move on.
What about Jewish academics and other academics that are pro-Israel, pro-Western civilization? Is there an opportunity to pull them out of these institutions that they have that they have served, that they have taught in, and do exactly what you're saying? Get them down to University of Texas, University of Austin, get them down to get them out to Hillsdale College or Grove City. I mean, is there an opportunity for any shift of brain power away from those institutions and the associated prestige and to new institutions?
Look, I love America very much. I believe in America very dearly, and so I believe that opportunity is sort of the growth engine. I think you're absolutely right, and I think you're seeing very smart people and very faithful people already capitalizing on this opportunity. You mentioned my dear friends at the University of Austin in Texas, co-founded by Barry Weiss, run by Panos Models, like people who are really building a terrific institution that will precisely grab not just the professors who understand that there is no more future in Harvard, Yale, Princeton, but also the brilliant students who understand, hey man, I'm not going to sit through this just for some worthless piece of paper. I think the governor of Florida did a tremendous job getting a lot of that state's kind of educational energy behind academic freedom and excellence and not groupthink. And I think you're going to see a lot of really, really smart people doing exactly the same thing. And as I said, it sounds like we're talking about stuff that is so grim. Oh my God, the universities are gone. But this is actually a very hopeful conversation because this is a beginning of building incredible new frameworks, training, curious and passionate young people. This is a rebirth. This is a beginning after some tumult, but of a new American golden age.
And people who say, well, Liel, look, Harvard is, been and properly chided. They just announced that they're not going to be taking public positions on social and moral issues anymore. So their reform is possible.
Well, if you believe reform is possible, please see me about a bridge in Brooklyn. I would love to sell you after the show. Look, when I wrote my piece, I wrote a piece in I believe 18 or 17, saying, "Hey, college is over. We shouldn't go to college anymore." And that caused quite a stir. I got emails or calls from no fewer than 7 university presidents, all of whom said, "You raised some good points, but you are selling us short. There is hope for us yet." And I said, "Look, I devoted almost my entire professional life to academia. I would love nothing more than to be wrong. It was a very sad day for me when I walked out of my NYU office for the last time. Prove me wrong. Tell me how an institution like Harvard or NYU or Columbia or any other major university could reform itself. How could you get, past a giant block of tenured professors who are using their tenure in order to block in more and more and more people who think exactly like them and continue to indoctrinate students and continue to keep, discussion from going? How can you do that?" And one by one, they said, I'm quoting here one major university president who said, tongue only partly in cheek, "Hey, what do you want from me? I have no real power. I'm only the president." I think that's very, very true. I think Harvard and Princeton and Columbia, et cetera, they'll continue to exist for many years. They have a fine legacy. However, they will become what they already are, which is finishing schools for the sons and daughters of the Qatari elite, the Chinese elite, and a bunch of other people who just need this finishing school at a prestigious American university because it doesn't really matter what happens next. But I think for hardworking Americans, for people who care about ideas, for people who believe in the promise of rejuvenation, why would you invest any effort in reforming something that is completely and thoroughly broken? I mean, just think about it. Forget ideology for a second. If you had a business choice, do you want to invest $10 million in fixing a very large company that is completely bankrupt, broken, and has so many liabilities in the form of all these literal terrorist supporting students and professors? Or do you want to take this $10 million and simply build a new thing that works better? I think it's a no-brainer.
How concerned, I know the focus has been on college campuses. I mean, just in terms of the domestic tumult. But how concerned are you that we're seeing a lot of similar behavior, perhaps not as organized, perhaps not as well-funded, but similar behavior at the K through 12 level too? You're seeing high school students, you're seeing in communities in suburban Chicago, I've seen it, wealthy, honky communities where there's, free Palestine down Main Street. So that's not a college campus. That's sort of the larger ecosystem in which the college campus exists.
Look, I'm tremendously concerned. It's one of the major reasons why my wife and I send our children to a religious Jewish day school. And this is from two, formerly kind of flowery lefties who are looking forward to having kids and being part of the great public school system of New York City. When the kids finally arrived and we, gauged the reality, we're like, yes, there is absolutely no way, because literally the Qatari government sponsors programs dedicated to proving to kids or, brainwashing kids that the state of Israel doesn't exist. I'm very, very concerned. And look, this is just another facet of what is so foundationally broken about our moment in America. It goes right up there with the fact that we no longer seem to believe that borders and sovereignty are a thing, letting in, literally anyone, including tens of thousands of military-age men from countries that are foes, if not outright enemies. This is all part of the great project. And it's not, I don't think it's about left versus right or red versus blue. I think it's, America is a covenantal country. It is a country that was founded on the notion that we have a special role to play, designed by the Creator himself. And every 100 years or so, you have to renew this covenant. That's simply the nature of covenants. We've done it in 1776. We've done it in 1861 when we realized that freedom had not yet rung throughout all the land. We did it in 1964 when we realized it was time for another, civil rights intervention. And we're doing it again, I think, right now, understanding that these foundational principles of this great country need a retooling. The educational part will be part of it. The immigration part will be part of it. But we're already having and about to have much more very serious conversations about what it is that we believe.
Well, and also, what about global institutions now that the UN has beclowned itself again, the International Criminal Court with the warrants for Netanyahu's arrest and the arrest of other top Israeli cabinet level officials and military, senior military officials. So what should I mean? Should the next president, if, let's say it's Trump, should we be talking about withdrawing from the UN? I know we're not a party to the ICC, but we also have been muted in our response to that. I mean, these global institutions that are run either by Chinese communists or just sort of Marxist revolutionaries from across the globe, they don't deserve the legitimacy of Western civilization support, do they?
I will answer it in two ways. On the one hand, I believe very firmly that the answer to your question is, heck yeah. I think one of the best things President Trump did was withdraw from the ridiculous Paris Climate Accords that were clearly not held seriously by the actual great polluters. I would personally love to see the United States not only divest itself from any involvement in the United Nations, but kindly inform the United Nations that if it wanted a seat for its ridiculous shambolic actions, kindly find a different place rather than my hometown of New York City. You could go do this in Tehran or South Africa, wherever it is that you people feel comfortable. On the other hand, I do not wish for this to be kind of interpreted as a call for isolationism. I think part of the challenge of this current moment in time is that we are realizing that the wars that are being fought against us, though we wish nothing more than to live in peace, they're fought at a very global scale. The so-called axis of resistance, the Iranians, the Russians, the Chinese, and a whole host of related terrorist organizations, they are striking everywhere. They are striking in Paris. They're striking in Kiev. They're striking in, the southern border of Israel. This is not a war we wanted. This is now a war that's being thrust upon us. So if we want to be smart about it, I think we would need to retain the spirit of international collaboration and cooperation, but with dignity and honesty and understanding that innate national interest trump all kind of gauzy talk of like, oh, the international community. There's no such thing as the international community. There is such thing as nations with their own interests coming together in order to face crises that shape all of their shared futures. I think, again, rethinking this tension and rethinking this balance and coming up with new institutions, new arrangements, new ways of doing things, that's precisely what we're going to be doing. For example, Senator Tom Cotton, in his truly excellent book, begins to kind of rethink America out of the kind of really devastating, and by the way, again, legacy of the old school Democrat Party with the formation of the League of Nations, etc., and towards a more equitable and more efficient future in which we see international collaboration without meaning that America pays prices that it absolutely should not pay and does things that are not in its interest.
Well, what's your assessment of Bibi's prosecution of the war as it relates to some of those, the parties to the Abraham Accords and the détente in the region and essentially the overtures to engage constructively with one another, Muslim countries and Israel? Does that work? Is that work been has that regressed now because of what's going on in Gaza? Or do you still see on the other end of this war the opportunity to build upon the work that was done with the Abraham Accord?
This is a great question. And again, another one of those that would require hours and much liquor. But to put it briefly, I think the problem here is it's a little bit different. I think personally, as someone who has, shall we say, had some sympathy in the past for Prime Minister Netanyahu and some of his policies, I think that that the way he's been carrying on in the war has been absolutely disastrous. I think he is deeply enmeshed with the Biden administration, doing a kind of pas de deux that I don't think he should be dancing. I think it is now evident that the Biden administration has no real interest in allowing Israel to achieve its aims. This is, of course, a tragedy because Israel's aims in this case are very neatly aligned with America's actual national security interests. President Biden is determined to keep Hamas in power and to strengthen it and to supply it, even as it continues to hold 5 American citizens hostage. And instead of standing up to the American president and saying, "Sir, with all due respect, we will go and we will pursue our interests until we, vanquish our enemies and return our hostages," I think the Israeli government has been, kind of enmeshed in this sort of really hellish and increasingly bizarre series of negotiations with the Biden White House, operating with two hands and a leg tied behind their backs. And I think other countries in the region are watching this. They are understanding that Israel is making a series of choices, that Israel is tethering itself to the current White House's wishes and demands, and therefore it may not be the strong, impactful partner that countries like the Emirates, etc., hope that Israel would be. I'm a very big advocate of ending U.S. aid to Israel, which I think is something that hampers the relationship between both countries. I think Israel is now, and there are plenty of numbers to show it, more than capable to stand on its own right. And the aid, this is, I think, one of the greatest misnomers ever, far from being kind of a gift package, is basically just a series of backdoor subsidies to American defense contractors that make sure that Israel has no independence and sustenance or self-sustainability when it comes to procuring and manufacturing its own arms and dealing with other countries in the region, while at the same time allowing the Americans to exert tremendous pressure on the Israeli government. I say let's end it. Let's let the United States and Israel stand together based not on foreign interests, but rather on shared national security concerns. Let's let Israel win the wars that it needs to win on its own without American dollars and American boys being compromised. And let's let other countries in the region who understand this principle stand with Israel.
So, I mean, if Trump doesn't win in November, if you get another term of Biden, given what you suggest his actual posture is towards Hamas and Iran, we know that, not to mention enriching Iran and Russia with our energy policy in tens of billions. But, and there's no real Arab world interest in putting together some sort of coalition government in Gaza post-war. There is no Arab world interest in accepting Gazan refugees. So, I mean, how does that shake out? Is Israel still sort of under existential threat, maybe more than we perceive it to be in America? Given this environment of sort of being of the Arab world walking away and the Biden administration playing both sides against the middle?
Well, again, this is an amazing question that packs so much into such a tight frame. So I'll try to answer it briefly. First of all, let's please dispose with the fiction that Arab countries care at all about Palestinian refugees. Gaza shares a border with Egypt. Right. This would have been the shortest humanitarian crisis in the history of humanity if Egypt cared at all about these people. All they had to do is just open the border and say, guys, you can come here while this war is being negotiated. That is not at all the case. Nor do the Arabs, for the most part, looking at a sort of Iranian-backed homicidal militia in Gaza and in Lebanon, Hezbollah, necessarily want to empower their major regional rival, by letting them build stronger and stronger and stronger, footholds and proxy wars in the region. But at the same time, I think, and again, anyone who's ever been in a schoolyard and gained basic kind of power struggle understands this innately. I think Arab countries that are looking at the way Washington is handling itself and the way that Israel is increasingly succumbing to Washington's demands are probably saying to themselves right now, well, it would have been great if Israel actually stepped up and carried through its own missions and defended its own sort of existential needs, because we are right now seeing, not just from Hamas, but more troubling from Hezbollah up north, a real and clear and present danger to Israel's well-being. We're seeing 200,000 Israelis in a nation of 8 or 9 million who are refugees in their own country because of this threat. It is not it is not negotiable. It is inevitable that Israel at some point very soon would have to face these threats. I think it's very likely that Arab countries like the Principalities like Saudi Arabia, watching along, would say that it is absolutely in their national security interests to see these Iranian proxies eliminated. I think the main piece of the puzzle that's missing is a strong American leadership that says, instead of, hey, keep Hamas in place and let's fund, all this operation with more tens of billions of dollars from international community aid funds, and make sure that the bad guys remain in power and continue to stage attacks for decades to come. It takes a strong American leadership that does, for example, things like what President Trump did when it eliminated Qasem Soleimani, showing our enemies that we mean business and letting our allies win their wars, which are also our interests.
Yeah, and instead we have Al-Qaeda and the Ayatollah sending thank you letters to campus radicals that the Biden administration is pandering to. So that can't be lost on the Arab world either.
Yes, sadly, there we are.
So do you think this extends well into? I mean, it's tough to do timetables, but I mean, what you're talking about, the dynamic, the dynamic and the threats that are multifaceted. I mean, we're talking about this is going to be war for a considerable period of time.
What we saw on October 7th was the first battle of a probably 5 to 10 year series of wars between Israel and its neighbors. It's not the latest iteration of the quote-unquote Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It is the first great battle of the Israeli-Iranian conflict, which in turn is really the Western Iranian conflict, because Israel is merely the gateway to what these guys want to do to us here in the United States. It will not be quick. It will not be pretty. It will require a lot of resolve. And I just hope that American leadership will realize this sooner rather than later, because I think the American people already have.
He is Liel Liebovitz. He's the editor-at-large of Tablet Magazine, tabletmag.org. Liel, thanks so much for joining us on Counterculture. Really appreciate your time and insight.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Please like this video and subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. And please leave a comment in the comment section. We'd love to hear your thoughts.